When I got married, and I was in the middle of my graduate school program, so I wasn't as hyper focused on starting a family, but when I first got on birth control, I had a lot of like bad side effects from it, so I got off of it after like the first month. And then I kind of was like, we were kind of just like, you know, if it happens, it happens. If not, whatever. We're not in a rush. I was in grad school, so we were kind of okay with it. But then like after some months passed and like, we're just like, like haven't gotten pregnant. I wasn't really wanting to, but now it's kind of like intriguing, like why hasn't it happened? So that's when I kind of started to take a different approach and say like, maybe let's start tracking like my ovulation and kind of doing more like formal kind of tracking and trying to conceive, like where I felt like we were actively trying to conceive. And so we did that for some months, and that was not successful. We still weren't pregnant. And then after that, I started working with my OBGYN and asked. I had heard from some people about like different options like Clomid, a friend of mine was telling me about. And so I talked to my doctor about that, and she was kind of a little bit like, you haven't been trying for a full year yet, like, you know. And I was like, yeah, but I've been like tracking, like, and so it wasn't like a full year, but I had been tracking and trying on the specific date, so I felt like, so eventually we did try that, and it was unsuccessful. And then at some point, my husband and I both kind of started talking about like, what's going on, like now we really kind of want this and it's not happening. So we kind of both started doing a little bit more research. And then that's when he did some research, ironically, and found out that like when he was born, he had some medical issues and learned that it can contribute to infertility. And it caused, he had to have like surgery when he was like a toddler or really young. And he had forgotten all about it, like hadn't thought about it, didn't come up. And so I was like, how did you forget about this? But you know, he didn't know what was happening back then. But so once he kind of saw that, we realized that, that's when we were like, okay, like I think it's time to just go to the fertility clinic and like get tested and see what they say. So that's what we did. Well, before we got to IVF, we started with a few other options too. We did timed intercourse, we did IUIs, I think 4 or 5 IUIs, all of those things were not successful. And as we were doing the IUIs, because when we first did all of our testing, when we went to the clinic, everything came back normal. So originally, we were both diagnosed with unexplained infertility. And so we moved forward, they recommended IUI, so we moved forward with that. And it wasn't until the IUIs that my husband had to provide a semen sample for the IUI, and then the first 3 months, the first 3 cycles that we did, they were noticing some changes in his count. And then that's when they were kind of just like, you know, the first month they were like, oh, maybe it's just, you know, a hiccup, maybe he was sick or something. And then after we noticed a trend, that's when they said, hey, like this really is impacting you, changed our diagnosis to male factor, and then suggested like the best option is going to be IVF, which was not exciting because it was a heck of a lot of money, and IUIs at the time were covered by our insurance, and IVF was not covered at all. So when the doctor said like IVF, it was like a gut punch, because I was like, I don't even know if this is something we can really do financially. And I was in the process actually of switching jobs, and so my new job actually didn't even cover IUIs either. They didn't cover anything. So we started looking into other financial options and ended up, you know, pulling from our savings, taking out loans, did what we needed to do to start our family. And just kind of going through the IVF process was a lot, just emotionally, physically, all of the things. It was a long process. It was very invasive, you know, going in for treatments. And I think because we had male factor infertility, they anticipated that my numbers were going to be great, and like, you know, everything is going to be great. Like they were telling me that, you know, you're gonna get pregnant really quickly, like. And so I got super excited. I was very excited, thinking like, okay, this is it. We got a diagnosis. We have our game plan. Like we're going forward. And as we were doing the process, so for IVF, the process in the beginning when you're getting your egg retrieval is like you're going in regularly, like every day, every 2 days for blood tests, ultrasound, monitoring. And so I was going in, and then they were noticing that my numbers weren't doing the things that they thought they were gonna do. And so then I had to get more medication. They were like switching up my protocol and my medications in the middle of the cycle because my follicles weren't growing the way they wanted them to. So I had to chase around town to find the meds. And when I did that, we were able to get, I think, about like less than 10, I can't remember the exact number, but it was less than 10 eggs retrieved, which they were not anticipating. Again, they thought I was going to have larger numbers, and I did not. But we still moved forward because we only needed one. So once we got the eggs retrieved, then we were able to create embryos, and we had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, we had 5 embryos, and then that made it to day 5. And with those embryos, one of them didn't freeze or thaw properly, so we lost one that way. And then our first cycle was unsuccessful, our second cycle was unsuccessful, and our third cycle we got pregnant with my daughter. And that was the first cycle that we didn't get, that we were not able to conceive, was really difficult because I was so excited, so hopeful, felt like this is gonna be it. This is a game changer, and it didn't work. And then the second time it was like, oh my gosh, they said my numbers were good, and then at that point we only had 2 embryos left. We had paid a lot of money, and so thankfully the third cycle worked, but then that left us with 1 embryo remaining. But we were able to get pregnant with my daughter and had my daughter